Hello again. Welcome to another edition of Media Watch. I'm your co-host, Eric Tait.
I'm Bob Anthony.
And I'm Alan Singer.
Dr. Alan Singer, educator, historian, our resident expert on all stuff pertaining to what's going on in the world. Bob Anthony, longtime veteran journalist, and Eric V. Tait Jr., longtime veteran journalist. Hopefully we can shed some perspective on what's going on in the world. And yeah, okay, so we're doing this recording session the Wednesday before our normal Monday airing on Manhattan Neighborhood Network. We're doing this in conjunction with EVT Educational Productions and the Zoom technical network capabilities. And a lot of stuff going on globally. We've got MidEast stuff still happening. We've got local election stuff still happening. But what do you think, Bob? New York has had a couple of interesting things going on that actually have national implications. Start with our mayor, Eric Adams, and his tiff with the city council, and segue to where else we can tie the national stuff to.
Sure. I mean, in New York, we have the Democratic mayor, Eric Adams, a former police officer, and we have a Democratic city council. And for most of what goes through the council, it's pretty much pass and sign. There's usually not much friction. But Eric Adams recently vetoed two pieces of legislation. One that dealt with how police officers record information on every stop they make, and another one that dealt with solitary confinement in Rikers Island. The city council passed two measures on both issues, and the mayor vetoed them, saying that he thought it was too much paperwork for the police, and he thought that the solitary confinement rules would make Rikers Island more dangerous. City council did not agree. City council overrode both vetoes. First time that has happened since what, the Dinkins administration, that a same party a mayor got his vetoes overridden, and it was 42-9. And the one person who voted was new council member Yusuf Salam, one of the Central Park Five, now known, of course, as the Exonerated Five, in one of his first votes as a council member. It's January. And he almost broke down and cried as he voted to override the veto. He said, if we had had this law in 1989, and that's, of course, when he was, and the other of his group were improperly arrested and convicted of a crime they did not commit in Central Park. If we had this law, and that's all he could say, or he broke down and finally voted. Yeah. So that's a rare thing in New York for an override of a Democratic mayor by a Democratic council.
Yeah. I think Council Member Salam was also involved in a recent incident that might have actually tipped the vote. He was driving in Harlem with that he represents, with his family, including his children, and his car was pulled over by the police. He identified who he was, and he asked the police officer why he was pulled over. Police officer then did not answer him and walked away. And the question came up, would he have been pulled over if he was not an African-American male? And that incident really, I think, cemented the opposition in the council to Mayor Adams's veto. And that's a big reason why it was overturned.
So these unwarranted stops, these driving while black, driving while brown, driving while poor, whatever, that they're trying to curtail, and the stuff that they thought they would curtail by putting body cameras on these cops, which always goes wrong or haywire or happens to fall off at the time things happen, so that all the push to get body cameras didn't turn into anything positive for anybody that's black and brown in this country. That's another issue. But because of the fact that this happens nationally, not just in New York, that vote to me is significant. Even the solitary confinement vote for me has national implications, because the criminal justice system in this country, I mean, if you remember all the stories about places like Angola and Louisiana and Parchment and all these other notorious prisons across the globe, not just in the South, California, you name it. So the fact that they're trying to rein in the abhorrent treatment of prisoners in these prisons is commendable. And I'm glad the city council was able to override that veto.
Look, Rikers Island is being investigated now by the federal government. There's talk of a federal takeover of the New York City prisons because of the number of suicides.
They've been pushing that federal investigation for years. Is it about to happen, or they're just still talking about doing it?
It's somewhat muddled by the fact that the city is trying to close Rikers Island, and we're trying to figure out which will happen first, the federal takeover or the closure. Both are in process.
Yeah, okay. We're catch-22. You
Yes.
don't do this, it's because we kind of do this, but we can't do this because we can't find some place to play. Yeah, okay, fine. But the fact that these cities are now trying to do something right is, I'm happy about that. Which brings us to other city things going on. We want to talk about New York again with Alvin Bragg and his investigation, or we want to talk about city councils across the country that are being under siege by folks who are trying to get things, local government to press the national government to do right in Hamas about a ceasefire. Which way do we want to go?
I can take care of the Alvin Bragg item real quick, so we can get because I think the Dearborn and the other city council issue was pretty important.
Let's do Bragg. Yes.
But unlike the charges facing former President Trump in Georgia, in Florida, in Washington D.C., the New York case is rather cut and dry. Ron Kuby, famous attorney, he used to work with William Kunstler, had a very good explanatory opinion piece in the New York Daily News this week. And he basically explains that Manhattan DA Alvin Bragg already has shared what he needs to share with the defense. There's no federal issue here. There's no First Amendment issue here. Technically speaking, it's ready to go. And so what's going to happen here is we'll have a faster outcome here in New York than we'll have in the other cases, and so basically be ready. The national focus will soon swivel to Manhattan criminal court.
Bragg, I believe, has a hearing date sometime in March, around March 25th or so, to determine whether his case will proceed or whether he's going to take a back seat to the federal government, right?
Correct.
The Trump legal team's primary strategy at this point seems to be delay, delay, delay. And what they've been doing is they throw as much crap out at the wall, hoping that something will stick. I mean, I'm looking at these cases, and the alleged crimes really look like crimes. And I think he's if these cases proceed, his legal standing is not very good. I mean, we just saw what happened with the suit around Miss Carroll, where the jury returned a decision against him of something like $88 million.
83.5,
3 times what she had requested, because it was his behavior has been so outrageous.
Yeah.
But you know, in Georgia now, they're dredging up all this stuff about Fannie Willis, where they're saying she had a relationship with another lawyer on the case.
This is the DA prosecuting the case, right? Fannie Willis. And so they're throwing all kinds of personal things, claiming that she had improper relations with the prosecutor she hired to help prosecute the case. Is that it?
It has absolutely nothing to do with the case, and it doesn't impact on the evidence. It's just an effort to delay and to defame, because what we've seen in the other cases, he attacks the judge, the jury, the witnesses. he attacks they attack everybody to defame and discredit them, hoping that on appeal they could get the case thrown out.
So
Correct, Alan. In the latest case, I mean, that 83 million was mostly punitive damages, not compensatory. Basically saying you really, really, really damaged her life. I mean, so yeah. His point is to defame, insult, and to bring down people. And in the Fannie Willis case, that might be improper, but legally speaking, it's irrelevant to the case.
yeah, and I'm not sure the jury is in yet on whether or not the charges that have been leveled, the alleged improper behavior, have been substantiated. And so you're right. They're throwing everything against the wall, hoping something will stick and delay the proceedings. And so, yeah, but that's a Atlanta County DA that's bringing a state racketeering charges against Trump and his cohorts. Bragg is bringing a local Manhattan, and these are all criminal cases against Trump. The federal government, Jack Smith, has a case in DC, and that's a related case in Florida. So all those criminal cases, he's trying to delay because he wants to get elected so he can then try to pardon himself. The question is, will that work?
It won't work for the Manhattan charges, obviously, local charges.
That's true. That's true. To get back to local charges and local government. Right?
Yes.
Let's talk about the fact that a lot of these local governments have been coming under fire by local residents because the international situation is such that they feel they can't get any redress from their federal government regarding the Gaza-Israel war and the fate of the Palestinians. And so I saw this phenomenal report on PBS. We're on a Wednesday night. I think I saw this on a Tuesday night, last night, where city councils across the country have been under siege by people of Palestinian descent, people from Palestine, people with relatives in Palestine who've lost loved ones, who are demanding that their local government stand up and demand a ceasefire in the Middle East in that war, because they say they can get no help from the US federal government. They're getting nothing from the federal government. They're totally disappointed in Joe Biden and his administration. And there was an amazing interview with the mayor of Dearborn, Michigan. I don't know what you've seen on that, Alan, but talk to us a little bit about some of the ramifications of the local government and other entities that are trying to make the country look a little bit more responsive to a humanitarian crisis.
Yeah. Well, I think the important point, Dearborn has a large Islamic Palestinian population, but other towns and cities that have been pushing for passing resolutions calling for ceasefires have not. Cambridge and Somerville in Massachusetts, their city councils both issued resolutions calling for a ceasefire. I think that on the national level, the Biden administration seems to be trapped. On one hand, it's calling on Israel to tone down its attack. The United States government has been involved with Egypt and the United Kingdom in trying to broker a ceasefire. But on the other hand, the United States government keeps supplying Israel with the weapons that they're using in their war. But there are local governments, and again, not just Palestinian, but Americans from all backgrounds have been pushing their representatives to call for a ceasefire. One of the more interesting things that just came up is the executive committee of the American Federation of Teachers just passed a resolution calling for an immediate ceasefire, calling on the United States government to broker it, and calling for a two-state solution in Israel and Palestine, something that the Netanyahu government has rejected completely. They have argued continuously that that's an important step. And I think significantly, the teachers union has a significant Jewish membership. So this is a group representing a lot of Jewish teachers who are saying we have to have a ceasefire now and the two-state solution.
Yeah, the things have gotten totally out of whack about death and dying in the Middle East as a result of this war between Israel and Hamas. And whether it's 25,000 Palestinian dead, whether it's 23,000, because the Israelis don't want to accept any figure that comes from the Gaza Health Ministry. And so they will tell you, oh, they're exaggerating, or imply that they're exaggerating. But there's no doubt from other sources that it's over 22,000 people dead in Gaza, whether it's 22, 25, 26.
I've heard it's close to 30 at this point.
My
I mean,
point is,
the number just keeps
because the
escalating.
two issues here that we should get into is the fact that you don't get very good reporting because reporters are dying in that war. And Alan, you had a text earlier about the fact that Palestinian journalists or Middle Eastern journalists, what are the numbers that CPJ came up with about how many journalists are dead? I mean, we did this story a couple of weeks ago, but there's more death than dying.
Well, as of January 31st, they're saying that at least 85 journalists on the ground have died as a result of this war. But 76 of them, of the documented journalists dead, were Palestinians, local people reporting on conditions on the ground. One of the reasons that other journalists have not been killed at the same rate is they're not going in.
Huh.
And, you know, the Israeli military argues they're being careful, but they can't be careful in this kind of war. And the people who are trying to expose what's taking place, they're dying along with other Palestinians.
So their game plan verbally is, oh, we're very careful, we watch out for civilians. So talk to us about the high rate of journalists being arrested. Okay. Let's see how careful they are. Talk to us, Bob. What are the latest numbers?
Well, the same group, the Committee to Protect Journalists, did a census of the number of journalists jailed, and apparently, and last year was a terrible year for that. I'll just read the headline: Jailed journalist numbers near record high in 2023, and overall, CPJ documented 320 journalists behind bars for their work as of December 1st, 2023, which is actually down from 363 in 2022. But unfortunately, Israel is unfortunately moving up in the ranks of countries that have jailed journalists. It's currently ranked 6th, tied with Iran, China, and then behind China, Myanmar, Belarus, Russia, and Vietnam, respectively. And I won't read this entire report, but the gist is that authoritarianism and the disrespect for journalists and their right to report has basically led to a sweeping away of press freedoms and journalists' rights. And I'll just read the last line. Meanwhile, Israel's standing in CPJ's 2023 prison census is evidence that a fundamental democratic norm, press freedom, is fraying as Israel exploits draconian methods to silence Palestinian journalists. This practice must stop. And that's what the Committee to Protect Journalists ends with in this statement.
Yeah.
It's bad.
It's bad. And the stories that we quoted about the journalists who were covering that war, covering that story. Alan, you talked about one who got so disillusioned and disappointed recently, he's going to give up the profession of journalism. He's going to quit covering the war. We talked about the folks whose families were killed. It is just horrendous, which is why these groups are petitioning the city council. If the federal government won't do it, you got to get out there and demand a ceasefire, because this is not helping. Too many people are dying. And guess what? This whole bit, the Qatar people that were interviewed on that same PBS broadcast was saying, people are talking a lot of rhetoric about no two-state solution, no this, no that, no ceasefire, while behind the scenes, we're trying our best to get a ceasefire and free these hostages. So maybe if they tone down the rhetoric about no two-state solution and no ceasefire, things might proceed better for hostage negotiation and freeing of hostages. But interestingly enough for me, on the fact that we're losing sight of the humanity of the folk that are losing their lives, of the military people who just got killed in Syria, our soldiers, the 3 people were all African Americans. And the sad part about it is 2 things. 2 were women, neither of which had reached their 25th birthday. The third one was a male. He was a more seasoned one. He was a sergeant. He was like mid-40s. And the mainstream media report on that story was, is the war widening? Will the US retaliate? What will the retaliation be? Little or nothing on who were these people on the front lines, supposedly trying to do their best to protect, quote, democratic norms, and nothing about who they were. And the black press was just as bad as the mainstream media. According to Richard Prince in his journalism report, basically, story was just ignored. Nothing about who were these people who paid the ultimate price. So I don't know. We're as journalists, we tend to like to get to the heart of the story from the human aspect of it. Who is it really impacting? Who's paying the price? But too much of the reporting is like the old baseball game, the score, who killed how many, the body count stuff in the Vietnam War, the baseball scores, who's up, who's down in the political campaign stuff. Not what are the policies? How do we fix it? How do we make things a hell of a lot better for, you know, how many refugees are displaced across the globe? Never mind just the Hamas-Israel war. The entire globe is awash with refugees seeking asylum somewhere else, which gets to our southern border. People seeking asylum, and we got a government that is trying to impeach the Secretary of Homeland. That wasn't even on our agenda, but the Republicans are launching an impeach Mayorkas campaign because they claim they're electing in their election of duty by letting people come in the border. And his answer is, why don't you give me the money I've asked for, give me the resources I've been begging for, give me the judges and the border security measures, the money that we've asked for, so we can solve the problem. And they already drew up articles of impeachment before they had hearings. So guys, tell me what that crap means.
Well,
go ahead, Alan.
No, this is all political. The Senate has been trying to come up with some kind of bipartisan way of addressing the border since 2008. And Donald Trump announced that the Republicans should resist any agreement because he wants to go into the election cycle being able to attack the Democrats for unable to come up with a solution that he's blocked. So what we have is a continuous politicalization of what is going on at the border by the Republican Party, so it can then accuse Biden and the Democrats of messing it up. This is duplicity at its worst and politics at its worst.
Now, I turned on my TV last night and I saw something live. It said live impeachment. Like, impeachment what? And apparently the hearings were going on. Mm-hmm. And I literally couldn't watch it for more than a couple seconds because there was nothing to watch. There was nothing there. There was rhetoric being thrown. There were facts being issued. To me, I'm looking at so many legislators in a room and thinking to myself, what a waste of the American people's time. But that's where we are with this impeachment inquiry into Mr. Mayorkas. And
they seem
just to keep us on track, we have about 3 minutes left.
They seem to have decided that impeachment is now a weapon that's going to be in the cudgel of the Republican-controlled House of Representatives. They've been trying to impeach Joe Biden, okay, because they're supposedly working on an investigation of Joseph Biden, the current sitting president. And before they even got sworn into office, they were already calling for Joe Biden's impeachment. I remember that distinctly. So now they're following up on stuff that they made up their minds to do with absolutely no evidence. And so far, their investigation has yet to come up with any laws, high crimes and misdemeanors that Joe Biden has committed. They haven't come up with any high crimes and misdemeanors that Mayorkas has committed either. But they're actually trying to impeach him because they don't like Joe Biden's policy. And now that the Biden administration is actually working with some bipartisan people to solve the border issue, as you were saying, Alan, they want to torpedo that. And so, as you said, it's all politics.
But it makes good grist for OAN, for Fox, and for other folks on the right to broadcast that to their followers. It's all political.
Now, there's something else you said a few minutes ago, Eric, that I think is important about how there's this general dehumanization going on. I think one of the things that has happened with these 3 soldiers who were killed in Syria is that the government, not just our government, has pushed the idea that we're involved in high-tech wars and that people don't, at least American soldiers don't die as a result because it's all technology. Yeah. And one of the things that happened here was that an enemy drone trailed a US drone back to base. And that's what killed these people, and that people do die from this technology. That's what's happening in Gaza. And it's like the Terminator Wars. We're pretending that people aren't dying. It's just machines that are fighting, but people are dying as a result of these high-tech wars.
That's a very good point. And with that, we have about 30 seconds.
Yeah. No point editorializing. I think, Alan, you put it perfectly correct. Guys, we don't know where this is going to end. The craziness that's going on in the House, the fact that they don't want to actually bring a bill together to help secure the border and fix the situation, the fact that they don't want to come together in the Middle East and do a ceasefire and stop killing those folk. With that being said, this has been Media Watch, folks. I'm your co-host, Eric Tait.
I'm Bob Anthony. Catch up to us on YouTube at Media Watch EVT.
And I'm Alan Singer. This was a really good talk today.
Thanks for joining us, folks. We'll catch you the next time. Stay safe.